Hello, welcome to another episode of the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And I'm Mike Varlet.
And this is our 34th week of our 52-week walking project around New York City.
That's right. And we are in Queens once again for the first of what is 3 separate walks surrounding movies.
So this walk is 3 different movies that all were filmed or took place in Queens: Coming to America, Men in Black, and Goodfellas.
That's right. And we are around all sorts of different neighborhoods, Flushing, Jackson Heights, Jamaica, all over. And I think those are 3 different types of movies. And we'll get to discussing that in a second with one of our favorite guests, our favorite people, our accountant, Frank Lynn.
Yeah, so we were really excited in the very beginning when we started planning our routes, and we knew that a handful of them were going through Flushing, which is where Frank's accounting office is. We knew that we wanted to get him on the podcast. He's really fun to talk to. We go out to Flushing every year to do our taxes. It usually ends up being right around the Lunar New Year, which is fun. We've caught the Chinese New Year parade a couple times out there. Frank gifted me a stuffed bull, which you might see on the table during our talk in the video this year, because it's the year of the bull or the year of the ox. And yeah, we had a really great time talking with Frank. It was a great conversation, and we talked both about the movies, the 3 movies that we were walking about this week, and we also talked a lot about accounting and taxes and what that all means, especially during this year and last year during COVID. So, you know, it's relevant. I'm sure people listening are doing their taxes right now. If you don't have an accountant and you need one, we got the guy for you.
Jet Tax Services.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to brand this video up left and right with his logo once we can get it from him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was a great time talking with him. He's a great friend. And one last note, programming note for all of y'all. We had 2 cameras set up for this interview, as we typically do. And for some reason, a little spooky to be honest, about 8 minutes into our video, the main camera switched to time-lapse mode. No idea why that happened.
Yeah.
Nobody pushed anything. Honestly, I wished one of us had pushed something so that we know exactly what happens. But as it stands, we don't have a main camera for most of the video. But we're going to look on the bright side for that one. And the way that I think of it as you have a bit of an over-the-shoulder accountant's view this episode, because that's where the camera is. And you got to kind of see what it looks like from Frank's perspective every year when we go and visit him.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's a specialty, this one. It's a special feature,
Yeah.
really.
It's a feature and a flaw.
Yeah, aren't they all?
Maybe, I don't know. But
Anyway,
yeah.
I hope you enjoy our conversation with Frank.
Yeah. All right, Frank, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We were excited to have you on from week 1. I remember,
Yeah.
I think this time last year, we came in to do the taxes, and we told you about our walking project, and you were like, okay, all right, well, do you need anything from me, guys? Are you going to be okay? Can I get you some snacks or something? You know, like, and now we're 34 weeks into walking.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a real thing. We're here at your office where we come every year. It's one of our favorite things to do is come and see you for the taxes.
Yeah, and
awesome.
It actually feels, even like normally when we come out here, I feel like we're taking this trip out to Flushing, like we're getting on the train, it's going to be a couple hours, and we walked here today. And it took us longer than taking the train, of course, but it like feels closer in a way. Like I feel like all the neighborhoods have like gotten smaller or more condensed or something, and I feel like it's such a, I feel like we could just show up here anytime now.
And it's much better. It's much better for walking now instead of taking the subway. So
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good choice on
I
that.
don't want to be
Yeah.
on the train for 2 hours anymore. So it's
Yeah. This is our first of many plugs for Jet Tax Service. Y'all should check it out. And one of my great
Thank you.
joys is being able to tell everybody we have a great accountant and just push business your way. So I don't know if
Yeah,
you keep
I agree.
I don't know if you keep a big leaderboard of how many referrals you get, but we try and keep our top of the list up there.
Yes.
In fact,
thank you.
I don't think our downstairs neighbor Amori watches, but if he does, he asked me. We came home at 3:00 in the morning last night, or not a few days ago. It was my birthday, and we were out and had a nice time. And then he was coming outside to smoke a cigarette, and he was like, "Do you know an accountant?" I was like, "Yes, I do."
In
And
fact,
then
Three in the
we
morning.
do.
I know. I mean, the whole thing was strange. And then I texted him immediately, and he was like, "Wow, you're quick." And I'm like, "Oh, it's my college roommate. You got to go see him." So
Yes.
Yeah, and you're a great accountant.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt.
Yes.
Everyone we've ever recommended, I mean, we think it's great. Everyone that we've ever recommended is like, thank you so much. Like, Frank is amazing. This is wonderful. So
Yeah,
we're really
Appreciate
selling it.
yeah.
And
Thank you.
this is not a sponsor, Dad. This is just something we believe in strongly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, I would definitely want to get back to that because both of us think the accounting thing is fascinating. That's why we come here and talk to you. We could just, do it online, but we like coming to see you. But this particular episode is about movie locations.
Yes.
And Queens movie locations, which you are a Queens native. And we got three films on tap today. Coming to America, Men in Black, and Goodfellas. And, we've been walking all week, visiting these locations and thinking about these three films. And we kind of came to the conclusion that they are three good examples of different types of movies as far as movie locations go, which is to say, like, you have Goodfellas, which is there's like 1,000 locations all over the city, and then
And all over Queens, like the whole borough of Queens, it's almost like they're really living in it
yeah,
when they filmed that.
for sure. And then there's Men in Black, which is like a type of movie where there's like one iconic location,
Yes.
and then there's Coming to America, which is the example of movie locations that are no longer there, where it's like they've been demolished. And that's a pretty common thing in New York City too, because there's so much turnover constantly.
Well, and also those movies are a little bit older too, so I think that's why I did a little research into it as well, and I was recollecting when I watched those movies, and I was like, these locations don't exist because that was like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So.
Right. Yeah, and the Coming to America also I think is kind of funny because one of the main plots of the movie is that Eddie Murphy is coming to America specifically to Queens to find his
The queen,
bride.
yeah.
And to find his queen. And the place that they arrive, the first place they show up after the airport is not in Queens. It's actually in Williamsburg. And the whole point of the movie is like, he's in Queens. What better place than Queens? But it's funny because it's like, they could have just said, go to Brooklyn. And it would have been accurate. But for some reason, like in writing the story, they wanted it to be Queens, but then they didn't actually want to film it in Queens, then they still wanted to film it in Brooklyn, which I wonder why. Like, I wish we could also find out from them why, but it's just a funny example to me of like, they want it to sound like Queens, but they want it to look a specific way, and
That's
that
not
specific
Queen- yeah.
way isn't actually Queens.
Yeah, the location for his house is on Hooper Street, I believe, in Williamsburg, off like the Hughes J. And I don't know, I mean, from my understanding of Williamsburg then, it was, but like kind of like a lot of New York City at the time, there were vacant buildings everywhere, And so I guess that maybe they were able to get it cheap. Maybe the building is kind of like isolated from everything, so maybe that felt like a convenient thing for filming. I'm not really sure, but yeah, they probably could have found something similar in Queens, but for whatever reason they picked Williamsburg instead.
Yeah.
And it's that's not too far away from Queens.
No,
really.
It's really like almost on the border. It's close enough.
Yeah.
And hey, it's a great movie. It looks good. Like the location scout did a good job. I
Yeah.
just think it's funny.
Yeah.
Still 718.
Yeah.
Still 718.
Still 718.
Well, we're gonna go out of our way one day this week, or just to capture some video of it for this podcast, just so people can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
But that's just because, we're industrious, hardworking people. Otherwise, the other locations, like we said, there's only a couple that we visit on this particular route. And one of them is the location of the McDonald's ripoff, McDowell's, which, as I said, does not exist anymore as a location. It was a Wendy's up until 2013, and then it became
condos.
Yeah, it's just condos.
Yeah,
right now.
it's just a block of condos now. So
yeah, they look nice. I'll give it to them. And it's right near a mall. I don't know if the mall was. I don't think the mall was there. It was just kind of a strip. There was also some buildings in the movie. There are some buildings across the street where the Soul Glow billboards are. That's the hair product that Lisa's boyfriend. He's like the family empire is the Jerry Curl product. And those buildings are gone too. But it's still like that Queens Boulevard section kind of still retains some of, I guess, what I think of as the essential Queens Boulevard, which is just like busy roadway, with lots of cars going back and forth.
And like the people are Frogger, and you just have to kind
of
right.
You have to get around. You have to get across the 18 lanes before you. Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
It's pretty much like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then in contrast to that, there's the Men in Black, where you go to Flushing Meadows Park and see those towers. And even I was saying before we were recording, I only saw Men in Black for the first time this week because I was always scared that it was really scary. I always thought it was like a really scary movie. But every time we'd go to Flushing Meadows Park, Mike would point out the towers and say, "Oh, it's from Men in Black." And I was always like, "Well, I thought it was from the World's Fair." But now that do you spend much time in that park? And I'm curious what your relationship is to those.
Actually, after I had kids, I do spend more time in that park because it's just a good place to go. Actually, after kids and COVID, I think I spend more time in that park because it's outdoors. It's close to our home, and plus there's parking. There's parking right there around the ice skating rink, and then we can just walk right into the where the globe is, and then where the dishes are, and it's not city. It's not Shea Stadium anymore. It's Citi Field.
Right.
So yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and when you see those old towers, do you think World's Fair or do you think Men in Black?
Actually, I think more Men in Black.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't around during the 1969 World. Yeah. So we weren't around during that time. So yes, I think Men in Black too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a nice walk around the park this week with a fellow YouTuber called Action Kid. We were on his channel a few weeks back, and that was really great. And he has like 275,000 followers. So it was nice because a bunch of them showed up over on our channel.
Yeah.
And if you're watching us today, thanks for stopping by. We love hanging out with Action Kid. And we...
yeah, he's a really nice guy, and we got to walk around the park again with him and talk about the history of the World's Fair, and Mike did a whole bunch of research into all those different buildings.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that video so that people can see it if they haven't before, because it was really fun. I mean, I knew that the World's Fair was there, obviously, but I haven't really thought much about it, and just having to spend the time to do a little bit of research and think about it just made me realize that there's this amazing attraction, or like relic of an attraction, whatever you want to call it, that exists in the middle of Queens. And I feel like I said this in the other video, so I'm repeating myself, but it feels like it would be in another city, like the attraction to go see this old fairgrounds, because like it's so aesthetically consistent, and it's like kind of this like, like the future and like, space exploration. It was 1964, so like 5 years before we walked on the moon, but only like less than 10 years of the space program existing. So like it was like an age where people were super pumped about space exploration. And then every building that's there like feels spacey. And there's a lot of sculptures that are about like exploring space and like being in the air and things like that, and the Unisphere, you know, and the just also it's like such a big space for New York City. Like it feels like a parade ground, and there's just not a lot of areas in New York City that are like that, you know. But I don't know if it like I don't even think for most people that are like thinking about New York City, it wouldn't be in the top 10, 15, or 20 like places to go if you're visiting New York City. You know, it's like, oh, Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, Central Park, you know, like Madison Square Garden. You know, you're going to go to all these other places before you go to Flushing. But
unless if it's during the U.S. Open.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
U.S. Open brings a lot of attention to that place.
Once a year. And it's good that there's at least something that, you know, is bringing all that attention to it. But yeah, I want to go back to Coming to America before we leave it for too much, because there's also a sequel coming out. I don't know if you...
Oh.
Yeah. On Amazon Prime. They're doing Coming to America 2.
What?
So
Yeah.
So there's probably some people here that are maybe tuning in because of that. Maybe they just watched it.
The plot is like something like he comes back.
It's
he
reversed.
Like finds out that he has a kid in New York.
What?
So he like comes back.
Leslie Jones is the baby's mama. And he comes back to have like the kid be the heir to his throne. And he's got a daughter back at home that's like, I don't think so. Like, I'm the heir, you know. And then the conflict is between like Eddie Murphy, kind of like in the first movie, which the first movie is really good. Like it kind of like the last 20, 30 minutes, like they don't end so great. It's like but like the first hour and a half is just like Eddie Murphy like at his top.
Yeah.
And James Earl Jones is his dad, and he's, you know, stuck in his old ways. And so like now he is the guy that's stuck in his old ways. But
I'm a father figure. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I'm hopeful for it. You know how I feel like sometimes sequels of older movies that are really good can go either way. You know, like it really makes me a little nervous because I feel like sometimes even when it's a really good movie and there's really good people involved, like it can sometimes get too much hype and then be really disappointing. But I'm kind of hopeful for this because I don't think they've actually been hyping it up like all that much. And it's coming out soon. And Eddie Murphy is still just like fantastic.
Yeah, he's very funny. Right?
Like I think he's kept his game strong.
Yeah. And so they basically like it's in the old movie, you know, the first 30 minutes they're in I know it's named after Bob Zamunda, but I forget the Zamunda, I think.
Zamunda,
I think so.
Sure is the name of
and then the rest
country.
of the movie's in New York City, except for the very end. And it looks like it's flipped. Like in this movie, the first half hour is in New York City, and then the rest is in there. But yeah, so I'm kind of excited about it, to be honest. I don't know if it'll be good or not, but we'll see. And then so there was one other location we visit on this walk that's related to Coming to America, and it's in very much passing. Lisa has just been, I believe, been told by Eddie Murphy's character, Prince Hakeem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That he is a prince, and for some reason she doesn't like that. She's like it's for the purposes of the plot. Like she feels like she's been betrayed.
Yeah.
And then she runs away from him, and then like she goes by a car wash. But the car wash, there's still a car wash, right? But it's like totally different. You know, like it had graffiti on it and everything, and now it's just like a boring brown old car wash. So
yeah.
But yeah, we went by and checked it out. It's also on Queens Boulevard, just further down. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how those, I mean, we talked a little bit about the Men in Black structure, but then even like those places have been just demolished and forgotten about. And I'm sure like so many movie locations have been demolished and forgotten about because it's been so long. But Goodfellas is the third movie on our list. And
Goodfellas.
It's also been a long time. But it seems like maybe it's just like more like in the awareness or something. But it seems like people are really holding on to keeping the Goodfellas locations around.
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one, they were already old locations to begin with, because it's not a period piece, but like it was made in 89, I think, somewhere around there, 89, 90, and they were shooting a movie that was set from, like 58 to 80.
Right.
So they had to have locations that already had a little bit of patina on them, And then also, I think that many of these places have capitalized on the Goodfellas, fame, whereas like there wasn't a McDowell's actually to like capitalize. So it was just a Wendy's, and who wants to go to Wendy's? Okay, it's just a Wendy's.
And like that one Wendy's franchise isn't gonna change their name to like McDowell's Wendy's or something.
Right.
Whereas like the diner that is now called Goodfellas Diner in Maspeth is now called Goodfellas Diner. I don't imagine it was called Goodfellas Diner
before they shot the film.
Goodfellas, right?
Right,
Because Goodfellas didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, we should say past tense on Goodfellas Diner, because now that we're saying this,
it's unclear. It's all boarded up, and it definitely looks closed. But it's unclear if it's like just closed for COVID or if it's... Oh, it had for rent signs on it.
it did.
Okay, it's probably...
I mean,
closed.
I hope that somebody rents it and wants to turn it into it, right? But right now, it's not a great time for diners. So, and it's also, I mean, it's a truck stop diner, like, which might seem strange to people that aren't super familiar with Queens, but there are some industrial areas of Queens that are basically about trucks and nothing else, and it's not super favorable to walking around. Of course, we walk there too, but it's like there are multiple trucks just parked in the parking lot, probably been there for a really long time. There's constantly truck traffic going back and forth there. There's the road that it's connected to is called Rush Street. I don't know if it's Rust Avenue or Rush Street, but I don't think you can get more industrial than Rust if your street name is, So. But but that location is where at the end of the movie, when Henry, who's Ray Liotta's character, goes to meet Jimmy, who's Robert De Niro's character, and he's like, I got there 15 minhes early, and he was already there. Like he was really anxious because he knew he had screwed up about the drugs. And he knew that Jimmy had been whacking people because he didn't want anything to get back to him. And Jimmy, he's like, I wanted to get a seat where I wanted to meet somewhere where it was busy, where nobody, everybody, I could see everything. And that was the scene. And you can see if you go close to the door, you can see there's movie stills of like pretty much every line of that scene that they have right by the entrance of the. So it's like if there was any confusion as to why this is named Goodfellas, it's right here, But
I love that when places that have shown up in pop culture like just make it all about that. Where it's like we aren't even gonna try to like do anything beyond this. We know why you're here. We're going to serve you what you're here for.
Right.
It's for Goodfellas. It's because you've seen this scene.
Yep.
Here's the scene. Enjoy it. Sit at the table. We know you want to sit at the table.
Take pictures. Put it on Instagram. Yeah. Put it on social.
Yeah.
Totally. And they don't try to like be like, what are you taking pictures? They're just like, come
this
on
is what
in. Do it. Go ahead.
Right. Yep. Yes, we've eaten there before because it actually is pretty close to where my old apartment was.
Is it at that booth? The booth that they
I don't think we went into that booth.
Did.
I don't think so. I do think I looked for it. I was like I was trying to orient myself, like which side.
Is it that that booth that they were discussing?
Should have asked. But and I don't know how long it's been closed. It may have been closed pre-COVID. It may not have been. Mm-hmm. It's there is like some signs of some moderate disrepair. So it may have been pre-COVID. But yeah, I hope somebody buys it and decides to fix it up. But it's in truck stop land, so you're not really going to get a lot of casual traffic coming through.
Yeah. You have to specifically go there just for that,
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Or you have to make it a diner where like people have, where it's like really good food or something also, so people have like more than just the Goodfellas fun thing to see.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at the list right now. We'll just kind of go down the line. The next one is, I think, the closest one to here overall, and that's the Jackson Hole Diner, which is a lot of diners in that movie. You know, it's either diners or bars where they're doing all the shots.
Yeah, I had never thought about that, but it's funny because I don't think about New York as being a diner place so much. I mean, there are a number of diners here, but it's not the thing that stands out to me. But I guess maybe it used to be more.
I think about diners a lot for it. I don't know
You
why.
love diners.
I do like diners. What do you like diners or no?
Yeah, I like diners.
Yeah.
Although when I think of diners, yes, I don't think of like downstate New York. I think more like upstate or out of, because upstate New York, like Geneseo, yeah, then diners are the it thing.
Yeah.
It's like Friday night we're all going to IHOP or something. Like,
Yeah.
But yes, downstate New York, I wouldn't think about diners as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although they're here. I mean, they are here, but it's like not the thing that I think of.
Yeah, I think of them. I mean, I grew up on Long Island, so there's a lot of diners out there. And then I think I don't know. There are less in Manhattan, I think.
Right. The ones in Manhattan are also like really like, it feels like they're trying too hard. Like the TikTok diner and like.
There is a whole class of diners that are, I think we had, you can probably look back on our channel and find, I think we did a rant on
talked about
diners.
At some point.
We can add a tag to that. But a lot of the diners in Manhattan are like $26 burger diners, you know, and it's like, what's the point? Why am I here? So, but the Jackson Hole Diner is the diner where Henry, and now I'm forgetting Joe Pesci's character's name. Tommy?
Yeah.
I'm glad you remembered. They are staking out a truck driver that's coming from LaGuardia.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes in to get his food, and while the guy's in there to get his food, they sneak in the truck and take it away. And then he's all freaked out that he got his truck taken.
Right.
I think it might be in like one more scene. I'm not sure, but I did like that they were talking about how they stole trucks from LaGuardia, and then they actually used a diner that was right near LaGuardia. You know, because it's not always the case that you put those two things together. So I was pleased that happened.
Yeah,
Agreed.
It's nice that there's also an airplane on
the
diner sign over there.
Yeah, it's a great aesthetic. That diner has like this really powerful. I guess it's 50s. I mean, they also have 50s music playing, like just passively outside. So that's where my head goes. But it's like 50s, 60s vibe.
Yeah.
And I've eaten there before, but it's been a long time. So I don't remember if the food's good or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've ever eaten there.
Yeah. And so going around the horn here, there's a couple of places. One on a street called Babbage Street, and that's under some elevated tracks, and that's where once Jimmy is starting to get really anxious about the Lufthansa heist and like people finding out about it, he has this guy that like right after the heist, this guy buys a pink Cadillac for his wife.
Yep, and then he gets
really angry about it. And then later in the movie, they find him and the wife under the elevated tracks, and that was the Babbage Street location. And
that's an intense scene.
Yeah,
the little kid finds them.
Yeah,
and it's what are they playing? They're playing. I think it's Layla. I think it's the end of Layla by I guess it's Cream or Eric Clapton. I'm not sure which, but the bum 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 dun 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 dun, and then they're just showing like the montage of all the people that are dead.
The whole soundtrack in that movie, I had forgotten how good it is.
Yeah.
But it really they want you to be in that like 50s to 80s, and I feel like the music really helps put you there.
Yeah.
It like you forget that you're in it, and then they play like the Shirelles or whoever, I'm saying the wrong name, but like they play some girl band from like the 60s, and you're like, oh, now we're in the 60s, and then they play like some rock from, it's good.
Right.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Scorsese, I feel like that is such an intimate part of his films, and also a really meaningful part of the movies he, the types of movies he makes. Like he's done so many documentaries on like the Rolling Stones or Dylan and things like that. It just, he's so keyed in on music. So I don't know. He must probably also work with somebody that helps him like figure out what tracks go where. But yeah, in a very meaningful way, music is like informs a lot of the scenes that he puts together. Yeah.
The score for Scorsese.
Yeah, that's right.
Never
That's
thought
right.
of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so only a block away from that location is a place that's also closed, but it still retains the bones of what was there, kind of like the Goodfellas diner. And that was called the Tropicana. And the Tropicana was where, I think Karen is his wife's name, I think. I could be wrong.
Yes.
I,
Yeah, she's Jewish. And
yeah. And that's where they have their really bad first date where he doesn't care.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so it's right next to a theater as well. And it just the whole block, the elevated tracks, the Tropicana, the theater, it all feels like if it had just like it makes sense that in 1990 or 89 or when the movie was made, like it already felt like a complete set piece, you know. So I thought that was really great location scouting for them. And now it still has the awning and everything. It could become something at some point, but right now it's nothing. And they had these really amazing doors on there that like the carved looked like flamingos or something. It was pretty cool.
I wonder how much of like these places also kind of like the Goodfellas diner, like how much they did a lot of that after the movie, like to keep it with that vibe and like to keep people excited about it, or like even just having, I can imagine just like having these really, really famous people in your establishment would give you like the energy to like, oh, I'm going to make it now. Like I'm going to put a lot of energy into my place.
Yep.
Or like, was it chosen because people are already?
It's like how, or it's whether you're riding the wave or you're creating the wave.
Yeah,
Right,
totally.
exactly.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. I wonder, that would be an interesting thing to like pay more attention to, like if you could follow a location scout around for some of these big movies that are being made now and like document what the places look like before and like what happens to them afterwards.
Well, I think it probably just depends on the demeanor of the owner, you know. Some people are, like you said, they're anxious to make it about that experience and lean into it and embrace it, and other people not so much, you know.
Yeah.
But and then other people, you know, they already know that the thing that appealed to the movie maker was that it was crusty and like kind of counterintuitive, and like so they're just going to continue to be who they were, you know.
Right. And then either be like hoping that another movie maker is going to come around and like want another crusty scene, or just like whatever, I had my one shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the last location that we visit from Goodfellas, and that's just on our walk. I mean, it's certainly not the last location in Goodfellas. There's like 30 locations.
There's so many, and there's a bunch of different articles. Like we actually got in touch with someone whose name I'm blanking on right now, but maybe I'll put the article in the notes. There's so many different people that go around and like find every single location that's ever been used in, especially these movies like Goodfellas.
Yeah.
There's like super fans out there.
So this last location's in Woodhaven, and it's called Near's Tavern, which I had never been to. And it's like it's off Jamaica Avenue, like 3 blocks into residential spots. So you might not even know that it was there, but one of the great things about this location was that they have, you know, those New York historical signs? They're like orange and blue, and they're made out of metal, and they're like, it's like, you know, George Washington slept here on this date or something, you know, like, you know what I'm referring to? They had one of their own made for the location, and like it was a pretty good replica. But when like the outside, the framing of it was done in metalwork, but it like looked a little weird. And then on the corners, it said like Nearest Tavern, and then like where all the text was that described it, it was like a nice, I don't know, plastic, like not oak tag, or like you know what I mean, though? Like a kind of like a weather resistant plasticky like board,
Okay.
and not the metal sign that these signs actually are.
Okay.
Like it was passable enough that it looked like it was really important, and it just described the history of this bar, and it actually, I mean, according to the sign, which I'll choose to believe, it was one of the oldest bars in New York City. It's from like 1820, and it mentions that Goodfellas was filmed there, and that there are some other movies that were filmed there as well, and it mentions it's like mentions it's good food, which like a New York historical sign wouldn't typically do, and it has like
Yeah, that's true.
it has this nice like oak bar inside, and that was where they planned the Lufthansa heist in the movie. So yeah, and there was like this great like outdoor eating area too. It looked like they were doing fine. Like they on the scale of like making it or not making it in COVID era, they seem to be doing okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'm excited whenever like this is all over to go back and like actually go inside.
Yeah, that's like a whole new another level of like doing these walks of like sort of the fan walks,
Right.
that we're not really experiencing right now because of COVID.
Yeah.
Where we're just like seeing everything from the outside, but some of them have like really great interior shots, which would be fun to experience.
Yeah.
See how much of that is retained from the time that they shot in there for that movie too.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that any of it even would be. Like it's been 30 plus years.
Yeah. Have you seen Casino as well, by any chance?
No.
No?
Yeah.
You should watch Casino if you get a chance too, because
Okay.
I was going to ask you, I have this kind of theory, because Casino and Goodfellas are essentially the same movie. It's basically Goodfellas in Las Vegas,
Oh.
where Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci are the two main characters. Robert De Niro is the narrator most of the time, but then Joe Pesci is sometimes the narrator, and it's about how Las Vegas became what it was, right? And I saw that one first, even though it's the second movie, and I like that one more. And my theory is that whichever one you see first is the one you like more, because it's so close to the same movie.
Wow.
Huh. I really like Casino.
Yeah.
But I don't remember which one I saw first.
I think, well, we went through a thing a year and a half, 2 years ago, where
I had never seen any of these movies, like Casino, Goodfellas, The Godfather, 1, 2, 3, like the one from the 80s. I had never seen any of these
gangster,
movies.
like the gangster mobster. Okay.
Any of the Bond movies.
During that time, it was big. Yeah, it was a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we had
Scarface.
like
No.
Scarface.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. We watched like all of them every single night in a row for like 2 weeks or something.
That's
We
crazy.
watched a different movie of like that genre.
Yeah.
But so I don't remember which one we put on first, whether it was Casinos or Goodfellas for me.
Yeah. Well, also the ones at Casino, the costumes are a lot brighter too, which I think maybe appealed to you
I
as
think
well.
that's exactly what I liked about it. It was like 70s, right? And
I think
was,
it's 50s through 70s.
Okay.
It covered, yeah.
It's just like so over the top. There's also a woman that's a main character that's
Sharon
like
Stone.
yeah, and her costumes are amazing. Like in Goodfellas, the women aren't really like wearing anything good. They're like supposed to be kind of dowdy, right?
And then the one woman that gets a fur coat, then Robert De
Right,
Niro
oh,
gets
yeah,
really
he won't
upset
let
about
her-
it. And then he was like, get this out of here. Get, like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
I remember
Yeah, at
that-
least they got the fur coat into the
He's
movie.
like, he got the fur coat in the movie, and then she was really happy about it. Took it off.
Just like
and-
immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not allowed to have any of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Casino, it's like all about that. Like everybody's like so dressed, so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'm really into.
Yeah. So I wanna go back to Men. We've talked about Coming to America enough. We talked about Goodfellas enough, I think. And is there anything else you want to cover? No. I want to talk about Men in Black just a little bit more, because we talked about Flushing Park and how great that World's Fair thing is, and also just the idea of the like the iconic scene in Men in Black, which I feel like sells the whole movie. The observation towers being UFOs and the Unisphere right there. I feel like all three of these films are like really great films in their own way. And I think the art direction in Men in Black is like amazing, like so strong that now we're almost 25 years away from that film being made, if you can believe it. And it just feels so consistent and relevant. And like, the CGI is separate from the art direction, but like the CGI still holds up.
CGI was good.
And then like all of their guns, right? They're these like silver futuristic, and that's like the World's Fair aesthetic. Like whoever put that together, like it was like genius. Where it's like, yeah, like we're gonna give them these silver guns and put them in the Age of Tomorrow section of New York City, and it's gonna feel like this one coherent thing, And they're all gonna be wearing these black suits that look like Mad Men, It's.
I think that makes the gun stand out more.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's kind of like the whole everything's black, so you focus on the gun.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah. But even like having Will Smith like transition from like also like his outfits that he's wearing in the beginning when he's like part of NYPD, which is also like not what NYPD wears. Like he like
no, he does not.
Like there's no way that like a police officer would ever be able
they were
to
his
wear
Fresh
what
Prince
he wore
outfits.
then.
It was Big Willie style. Just like
orange and
right, right.
bright.
Yeah.
But I kind of also love that it like it told you like who he like it gave you a whole story about who he was like before he even told you who he was like in the acting or in the script.
Yeah.
And then they were able to put him in that like nondescript outfit, which made like the guns stand out and made everything else stand out. But you already like, you knew who he was. Like, if he had just shown up in that outfit, I feel like it would have lost so much.
Well, I was waiting, Jesse, she said she hadn't seen the movie before. And I was waiting for the line where he goes, the difference between me and you is I make this look good.
Yeah.
And she laughed. I mean, it's like that's the whole movie, in some ways. It's just like, this is the vehicle for Will Smith, who has this like amazing star power. And like, but also like he's so capable of being humiliated too. Which like Tom Cruise is not going to deliver an alien baby and be thrown around by the mom, like it's just not within his toolkit. But Will Smith can, go chase down an alien with a gun, as well as Tom Cruise can,
And with the little tiny...
That little tiny guy with the kickback is so funny.
And I think that's another thing about that movie that's really impressive too, is there's so many things that are like suspension of disbelief, and like he didn't train, like nobody showed him how to use that gun, or like Tommy Lee Jones wants to get his mind erased. It's been like, dude, it's been 2 days. You want to wait maybe like a month until you leave this guy in charge? But like, because the movie is so strong, you don't care about that sort of stuff. And like that, not all movies can do that. Some movies need more logic, and then if like they deviate from the idea of like logic at all, it falls apart.
Right.
But for this, like, it's just pure popcorn movie, and you don't care that like none of this logically makes sense. You're just along for the ride. And I mean that can be hard to make for a movie. Hard to get to that place.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like there's part of it that you're like, when he said like erase my memory, I'm like, oh no, but I was more upset because they had become such good friends, and I was like sad that they weren't going to get to be friends anymore. Right. More than I was like concerned. I was like, Will Smith, like he'll be fine, like he's got this.
Yeah.
But I like wanted him to keep his friend.
Yeah.
And I think the movie does a good job setting that expectation from the beginning, so you don't have this crazy transition from like a very logical, like beginning to like this crazy like out of world. Like I think they do have that in the beginning, set that expectation. I think Will Smith embodies that because he's like he's out there already. Like you're saying, like a cop doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
So like the fact that he's walking around and he's doing this stuff like a cop, I was like, I think you already know. You're like, all right, some wacky stuff's gonna go down here because you know the cop looks like this.
Exactly.
Like it's not gonna be some straight narrow person that's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And because he like fits outside the mold, you also allow like, well, they didn't have to train him on that gun because
he's Will Smith.
He's got it. Like he's fine. He's gonna figure it out.
Right. Do you remember growing up in New York City? I mean, that we're the same age if we're not.
Yep,
you know.
Yep, we are.
It was 13 when that movie came out. 97, 12, 13.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? And like, you're blocks away from the climactic scene of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember being excited, or were you kind of like, because you grew up in New York City, it was like, oh yeah, another movie filmed in New York, or like, do you remember like having any thoughts about like how that made you feel?
Actually, I think after that movie, I walked by that area and I was like, was this really a UFO?
Totally.
Like was this because I didn't really know about the World Fair. Like I said in the beginning, I was like, we weren't around for that.
Yeah.
So like, I actually thought that was more famous for Men in Black and not the World Fair.
Yeah.
And then I was like looking at it and I was like, can this fly off the hinges? Like, did it fly off? And it come? Yeah. But also, I think at that time too, I didn't understand a lot of the filmmaking industry and CGI and all that.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, whoa, like they really could lift that off and like it could come and it could come back and. Right, but once I learned it, I was like, okay, no, that was all CGI. They're not blowing that up, and they're not like bringing that back or anything.
They didn't like put the Unisphere back together after exploding it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you think after watching it at all, were you also thinking like maybe there are a lot of aliens in Manhattan? Like, did you have that thought at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I was around it was around where I was, more high school. So yeah, I was like, okay, fine. It's probably not going to be aliens around. But the fact that they made it a plausible story, it's like sometimes I look at people, I'm like, like this person might be an alien. But like, I think it crosses my mind.
Yeah.
It's like, but realistically, right, it's kind of like the whole Santa Claus thing. I was like, around that age, I was like, all right, Santa Claus is not buying my presents. It's mom and dad.
It's Tommy Lee Jones. He comes every year, then flashes us, and there's presents. I don't know. Cool. Well, I think that maybe covers it for the movies.
Well, I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
And maybe this is too general of a question, but since we're talking about movies, I mean, I think part of why we wanted to have you on is because you're in Queens, you're our friend, you're our accountant, and you're kind of related to movie through acting.
That's right. You're an actor.
And I wonder, and again, this might be too general of a question or too hard to answer, but I'm just curious, is there any movie that you grew up with that was maybe filmed in New York or maybe not that like got you excited about acting? Like, was there anything that when you first got into acting, since that's part of your history, is there anything that stands out that like got you excited about it? Or like a movie that you remember feeling like, ooh, I want to do something like that one day? Or like,
I would say for movies, that's a great way to tie it all together. But it's like, accounting and acting. Okay, but I was going to say, like, I felt like when I was focused more on acting, it was characters more so than the locations. Mm-hmm. Like, I viewed certain characters and I was like, ooh, that's really cool. Like, I saw a lot of the Jackie Chan stuff when I was younger just because he was funny, he was Asian. I was like, all right, I could relate to this. It's like, I'm not so good at martial arts, but like, it's like, I think being funny and being like, I think that was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of those kind of movies.
Yeah.
And to a lesser extent, probably Jet Li. But I think Jet Li was more so like debonair.
Yeah.
He wasn't so much like, because I think Jackie Chan was more.
Well, Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx, right?
Rumble in the Bronx. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, that's
like,
great. I mean, Jackie Chan's incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But his own stunts.
Yeah.
So it's like it's more so character based instead of, although there is a lot of scenes that are in New York. I think when I was watching the movies younger, I didn't realize it because I really stuck to Jackson Heights. I was like, I actually grew up in Jackson Heights, and then I moved out here in Flushing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So later you realized, like, oh, that movie I liked is actually
Like,
from my
Yeah,
hometown,
like Spider-Man and like all that. I was like, hey, that street looks familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. That must be kind of a cool experience too, to like occasionally be like, because so much happens in New York. But as a kid, yeah, I can understand you were like more insulated, of course, because kids are. But then, like, as you realize, like, oh, hey, like my city's cool.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like I was like, yeah, a lot of these scenes do happen around.
Yeah. Totally. So I want to move to accounting, and I promise y'all should stick around because this is actually, I mean, I don't want to get you anxious. It's February. You got a little more time. Don't worry.
there's still 2 months and a week or so, right?
Yeah.
And
But
But
extended again this year. Okay.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
possible.
But I mean, we come every year to visit Frank, and part of I mean, we're his friends, but also we enjoy talking about this sort of stuff because it's really interesting, particularly when you have a good accountant, because they're able to tell you like the latest of what's going on. And these past 2 years now, like it's just important to talk about because this is
Yeah.
this is not going to happen in our lifetimes again, hopefully. You know, like something like this,
Yeah.
you know, it's crazy. Like the government is facing this amazing, crazy catastrophe, and then they're still trying to collect all the money that they normally collect. And there are all sorts of things that people are applying for, and you know how much of it's going to slip through the cracks. How many how many people are like, oh, maybe I can get by without doing this, and you know, or how many other people are like, I got so many documents I got to fill out in order to be compliant. You know,
Right.
like it's wild. I mean, what? Tell us, like, boy, I don't even know where to begin. Like, we're almost a year out from when it started, right? So, like, what was? You were in, you know, March, middle of March last year would be when it's like peaking, busy season for you. Like, what happened those first few weeks? I mean, was it still like full speed, or did everybody just kind of like stop contacting you, and it's like every person for themselves? Like, how did those first few weeks between tax day 2020 and when the pandemic like go for you?
So that was a very strange time because it was going full throttle, like everything was going kind of normal. And then once that hit, it wasn't that people stopped contacting me, but people just like had this break. Like they just all of a sudden slow down and they're like, oh, we don't know what's gonna happen. Or like some of them, you know, I did fear the worst. Like some of them actually did get COVID. And like they just
Yeah.
went MIA for like 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden they email me back in like July or August, and they're like,
my
"Oh yeah,
gosh.
I'm good enough to like do this again." And I was like,
Oof.
"Let's go." Because at first I was kind of like, "Oh, where did these people go? Like, how come they didn't give me the stuff yet?"
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Oh, they So like I didn't want to push.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
why I kind of let everyone go on their own speed. But it was very strange for me
Yeah.
because it was in the middle of March and the kids' school, like my kids' school closed, and I was like at home and I wasn't working in
Yeah.
the middle of March, and I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like I was like, I'm really busy there, and so it's strange that
Yeah.
like I was at home playing with my kids, and we were all like, we don't know like what to do, but the
Yeah.
kid can't go to school, so someone's got to be at home watching the kids.
Right.
Right.
I
But
mean, were you able to compartmentalize that at all? Insofar as like, I can enjoy this time. I mean, like obviously, there's like the whole COVID anxiety, like period, that everybody's experiencing. But then it's like, did it feel like a break from what you were doing at all, or was it all just like, my life is on hold right now. I don't know what to do.
That's the one thing I wish, and I'm glad that me and my wife did talk about this. Like that's the one thing I wish I would have went back to, not let the anxiety be so overwhelmed that we kind of overlooked the fact that we had so much more time together as a family.
Right.
Like with my wife, with my children, with my mother-in-law. Like that was something that never happened during tax season for me ever.
Right.
Like I've been doing this for 15 years. I never had that kind of time.
Right.
But I think
Right.
because we were so occupied with the fact that we don't know what's coming next, like there was frustration. Obviously, we were all nervous. I think, you know, we got into some shouting matches with what's going on because they're like, I'm not getting my work done. I'm not getting my work done. I have to do work. Yeah.
Totally.
So that's kind of what was going on the first
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's hard just in general to, like, when there are so many unknowns. Like it's easy. It would have been easier if we had, like we thought, oh, maybe it'll be a 2-week shutdown. And if we had known it'll be a 2-week shutdown, we could all just go home and take a nap for 2 weeks, and get up and go back to work. But it was like, we'll try 2 weeks, but it might be a month. And then we get to a month and it might be 2 months and it might be 3 months. And now we're like, oh, this is kind of just how we're living until we're not living like this. But I think it made it really hard for everyone to enjoy the time.
Yeah.
I also remember talking to you on the phone a couple of times because I made you some masks and we were going back and forth on, you were helping me find some
toilet paper,
but also tax stuff. You were also helping me with my taxes, and you were also suggesting some things in case my business shut down or if anything like that happened. And I remember you mentioning that people were doing all this extra accounting stuff that they never would have done because people weren't going into work, so they had plenty of time, so they'd call you and be so can you get back to me in an hour, I want to do this extra thing that normally so it sounded like you had a lot on your plate too, right, besides just normal tax season.
Right. So it didn't really, I think that's what a lot of people were they shut everything down. I was I didn't feel like I had a break at all, because during all the uncertainty, then that's when all this loan stuff, grant stuff started happening, and everyone's I need this for my grant, I need this for my loan, how do I apply for this, how do I, so then that flood of things came in maybe a week or two after the pandemic hit, because that's when everyone was oh shoot, I gotta shut down my business, I don't got any money, how am I gonna retain my employees, so right, then they had all these grants and loans, which was great,
yeah,
but I think that in the middle of tax season, which is kind of what's happening right now again, but that in the middle of last year's tax season was wild for me.
Yeah. How did, I guess this is a two-part question. How did the government respond in terms of being patient or giving forgiveness or whatever with that timeline? And did it differ from federal and state? I guess I don't really know how much you interact with the government in that way. I know you submit the taxes, but that's kind of an impersonal process, I guess. But do they contact the accountants in any way to let them know what's going on?
So there is a group that I'm a part of, which is the AICPA. I'm always happy to plug for them. They're the top-notch accountants across the world, across the U.S. So I'm in a group I volunteer for them, and then we do have a lot of contact with government reps in terms of what's going on.
Yeah.
And during that time, I think they didn't know what was, so they couldn't really pass the information because they didn't know. They extended the deadline maybe 1 week or 10 days before. So we knew on April 2nd.
Yeah.
It was extended to July.
Oh, wow.
And that's how late it was, because they didn't know whether they wanted to extend it or not, because they didn't know the severity of this pandemic.
Wow.
And then as it got that close to the deadline, then they extended it. But it became a mess because the state governments didn't conform to the federal. So you had the federal government coming out April 2nd saying it's extended to July. But all 50 state governments didn't agree to that on April 2nd. Some of them agreed on April 5th, some of them agreed on April 14th, some of them agreed on, so I had this, I was literally speaking to clients where my information was wrong right after I got off the phone. And I'm
oh my gosh.
I was what the, I just got on this phone call for half an hour, and then they changed the information saying New York conforms now. New York is extended. And I'm so then I started getting on phone calls with clients, and I'm as of my, speaking to you as of 4:45 on this day, the information is accurate.
Right.
But 5 o'clock, it could change.
Oh my gosh.
Do you think that was a consequence of the administration that was in at the federal level? If we had an administration that was taking a more proactive approach in leadership rather than kind of letting the states figure it out? Do you think that was a consequence of the states having to figure it out themselves? Or do you think that it would have been like that, in any instance where they were trying to delay?
I felt partially it was definitely the administration.
Okay.
That there was some uncertainty and there was confusion going on.
Yeah.
But even indirectly, I mean, I don't want to get too political in this.
No, and I'm not trying to either.
Yeah. It's just that I felt just the beginning of that there could have been a little bit more clarity in terms
Right.
of like how things were going to be handled instead of like trying to figure out everything on the fly.
Yeah.
Right.
Which made us figure out everything on the fly.
Yeah.
Right. And I would think, did you have anyone, and don't answer this if you can't, but like, was there any instance where you were like filing extensions for people and then finding out that there was an extension? Like, if it came all the way up to the end, I can imagine like some people maybe being like, oh, well, I'm not going to be ready for April 15th. And then you're like, because you can usually just file an extension, right? So you're like doing that work, but then it turns out that isn't work you even needed to do. So you're like kind of wasting your time, or?
Yeah, at that point, I was playing it very safe, especially for the people that, you know, I mean, God forbid, whatever happened to, like, some of them actually did contract COVID. Some of them had family members.
Yeah.
So I just started filing extensions just for people, just to be safe because they hadn't contacted me or because uncertainty of the extension.
Right. Oh,
So like,
okay.
yeah. So I was doing it both. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna cover all my bases here. I'm just gonna start filing extensions and like.
Yeah. Yeah. And that responsible accountant. You're so responsible to your
Sorry.
clients that you
I was
like
trying to be.
looking out for everyone.
Jet tax service, everybody. Yeah. Of all of the programs that have developed as a consequence of this, and most of them will go away because it won't be required. Are there any that like you've seen that you're like, I wish that this could like stick around? Like I wish that there was something, you know, as far as like a tax break or just some sort of incentive or something that like, this makes sense. I wish it would be a thing. Or is it all just like, it just all feels like tragedy, emergency like stuff?
No, I think the industry ones, it's a little bit more peer-to-peer. The industry ones, even though this is not like a government-sponsored one or whatnot, but the peer-to-peer ones, I thought was some great things that came out of it. Like I support one for actors, I support one for restaurants. Like those two are big things for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and those are great. I think those are great resources because it doesn't rely on, you know, whether the government is giving funding to that. It's like peer-to-peer. So it's like the people that can give, you give, and the people that need it, you can take it. So I think those, you got access to the money a lot faster, less strings attached, and then it's directly related to your industry. So it's like, hey, I've been mostly affected because I'm in entertainment, I'm an actor, whatnot. You can get access to this because it's earmarked for actors.
Gotcha.
The government ones, I thought it's a little bit more confusing, even though, yes, it's available, and I think that's going to really just be during this pandemic. The PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, PPP, and then the EIDL. Those the government ones are the big ones that got funding, but it was, I mean, the pandemic started in March. I mean, some people weren't getting this until like July.
Right.
So
Right.
I mean that I didn't understand how you could survive that long in a business if you're not getting this funding
Right.
Right.
for so long.
And then even like the stimulus checks or something, like, does that interact with like accounting at all? Like, do you have any thoughts on like how they should be doing stimulus checks, or is that just kind of like it's happening, you have to pay attention to it, you have to mark it down? And
It's like my biggest, the first thing that I think about for those, because it's so few and so far in between, I felt like it was more of a formality than actually help, because I don't understand how I mean, we live in New York City. It's such a high priced like place, high cost of living.
yeah.
And you're getting $1,200, and then you're waiting 10 months to get another $600. So you have $1,800
Right.
for 10 months of living. I mean,
Yeah, that's not even our rent.
yeah,
Like-
for 1 month, right?
Yeah,
For
exactly.
1 month.
That's what
yeah.
I mean,
So
yeah.
it's I think it's hard that I'm like, I don't understand the point of this if you're gonna give us $1,200 and then wait 10 months to give us another $600. So you have $1,800 for 10 months.
Right.
It seems a little bit more like a formality instead
Yeah,
of
totally.
actually a stimulus.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it feels political, not really a format. It's just like I think they're calculating how much money they can give the common people in order to make them feel like they're getting something, even though like
Yeah.
the businesses are getting absurd amounts of money.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of, I mean, the language is kind of funny, it's not funny, but it's like interesting language, because I guess like when I think of just the word stimulus, like I guess what they're doing is kind of a stimulus. It's just a random chunk of money that's going out at a
Injecting.
random time. It's like, go spend it, but it's not like what it's supposed to be is like
helping
relief.
people.
Like
Yeah.
it's supposed to be relief, right?
Yes.
And it's not that. Like it's not acting as that. But I guess they're not using the word relief. They're using the word stimulus. So it's like, I wonder how much of that is planned to be like, yeah, well, we didn't say we were going to like help you. We said we were going to stimulate the economy.
Well, actually, the technical term is EIP, which is Economic Impact Payment.
Oh.
Wow.
That's
the real inside accounting info we need here.
Yeah.
So right, they classify this as EIP. So
Okay, so that does sound more like what it
I think
should
that
be.
right, the layman term of that, I think they're saying stimulus so people understand. Otherwise, if you're like, oh, like if I was talking to like my clients, I was like, oh, did you get your EIP? They're gonna be like, what?
Like how many numbers and letters and
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well.
yeah.
So how is this year different from last year so far? I mean, obviously, like we're all living in this world now where this has been happening for a year, so there's no shock, and I'm sure everything that would be related to the pandemic is now baked into your scheduling. But there's probably some new challenges that are happening right now, I would imagine. I mean, what is the landscape looking like so far?
I hate to say this, but it seems like history is repeating itself. It's just with different fears and anxieties. I think last year it was a lot of unknowns around the pandemic and how everything was going to shift. I think this year it's more so, even though it's during the pandemic, but how the pandemic will impact the season itself. Meaning, like I already been asking like my group in the AICPA and also asking the government, like what happens because one of my co-workers became a close contact and she had to quarantine. So like I lost a coworker for like 2 weeks or what, and I was like, like if we lose someone doing the work for 2 weeks, like what happens? It's like well, I hope we as accountants don't get penalized for like 300 tax returns that we can't send out because of that. So I think it's a different fear and anxiety, and on top of that, they signed in another bill to on December 27th, right before tax season, for like the next round of the EIPs and the PPPs and the EID, all those. I mean, you can send a link for what they all mean, but like, but they signed it in, and I was like, why are you doing this in the middle of tax season?
Like right when everyone's about to, for like someone like me who's just compiling all my stuff right now, in a way it's better because I'm like, well, I'm on the computer anyway. But for my accountant, it's not great because you're like, yeah, I know I'm on the computer anyway, but also like, I have to file your taxes.
Like in other words, they added on more deadlines for us to meet in this compressed tax season, and I'm like,
right, when there's already deadlines. Yeah.
Do you have any anticipation that it could be delayed again?
Right now, we're having internal discussions. This is breaking, but we're having internal discussions that we are like the CPAs for the most part. The general consensus we're voting for no, like no extension, even though they may consider it. But if they do, it will be close to the deadline that they will announce that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But and that's strategic. I don't know if you want to cut this out later, but like it's strategic because
you tell me later.
they want to make sure that people are not purposely like being lazy or delaying it because they know there's an extension. So they probably won't announce it till like the first week of April again.
Yeah. That's actually not about. I mean, I feel like a lot of people do wait till the last minute because you have until then, and if you have till June,
then they're just not going to do it
until
until
June. Yeah.
Sure.
So if they do delay it, no one's going to know until like the first or second week of April.
Yeah. Have you observed that any increase, decrease, or same amount of auditing this past year? Like, is that a thing that the IRS was laying low on this year, or they're overwhelmed, or?
Well, seeing as how I think the last check I did was there were still like 50 million tax returns like backlogged in terms of processing. So auditing for that is not even in the question yet. For the cases that were still outstanding, I think they automatically gave like extensions and a little bit of reprieve for because even the government workers weren't going into the office, so they were not retrieving the mail that frequently, so they wouldn't even know like how to move the case along. So like I think they were going in like one day out of the week, and they were still only working from like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. They weren't doing overtime.
Right.
So
this might not be a question you even know, but like, do they hire contractors to like go through that? Like, do they have a mechanism to ramp up to like do an audit process, or is it just the same amount of staff that would be going through a backlog of 50 million, tax returns?
That I don't know. I don't know whether they would try to speed. Although now that they're moving past this initial pandemic wave, I think they are trying to ramp up. And also because, the next wave of tax returns are coming in. Because tomorrow is the first day you can file a tax return.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Really?
Yep, tomorrow's the first day.
Oh. So by the time this comes out, everybody can
You
totally
get on it,
file those
everybody.
tax
Jeez,
returns.
what are you
Get
doing?
into it.
I had for some reason I thought it was like January 1st every year.
Yep. So this year it's extremely delayed. It's usually around third week of January, but this year is extremely delayed because they have a backlog. Plus, they're trying to adjust their systems to accommodate for all the changes in this year's tax returns, and some of it is related to the COVID, the CARES Act, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
How has your relationship with your clients changed? Maybe some ways that are worse, some ways that are better, in terms of not being able to have as much FaceTime as you might normally. Like, are you Zooming, or are you on your phone? Just emails? Like, what does your client interactions look like versus maybe how it did pre-pandemic?
It's a lot of emails and phone calls.
Yeah.
I think yes, I've learned how to use like Google Meet, Facebook Video, Blue Jeans. Like there's a whole lot of different. I was like, man, I'm using all these different Zoom.
Yeah.
Like, I can't forget about Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm using a lot of different Skype.
What's your favorite?
I think the one probably still Skype right now because Skype was something I was familiar and I used pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think after the pandemic I was using more Zoom.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Skype and Zoom.
I've never even heard of Blue Jeans.
No,
Blue
me
Jeans.
neither.
That one's not as common. I think I used that for a couple clients, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's funny how Zoom has become just like as ubiquitous as like Google. I'm going to
like
get on a
Kleenex.
Zoom. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of it until March 15th or something,
Yeah, they were really positioned to do good.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so a lot more, what's like the percentage, if you could give a percentage of like people that used to come in that now you're just doing it all like over the phone? Like,
I would say it's a pretty big, because we're still in this tax season, so a lot of the people they haven't reached out to me to see what they want to do. But yeah, I would say there's a big shift. There's already a shift that I noticed because they email me and they're like, oh, so what's going on? Like, what's going on for this year? Because I don't know if you're going to be accepting in client meetings or whatnot. So yes, like I would say it's probably going to be more than a 50% shift. I don't have the numbers yet, just because.
Sure. Just kind of, from your head.
But yes, it's going to be a big shift.
Yeah. If you had to give a pitch to anybody that's watching right now, right? You're going to sell yourself. So, they're on TurboTax or some other nonsense, and they think they can just do it themselves. What is your selling point for having, not just Franklin, the greatest accountant in New York City, but just having a personal accountant in general? Like, what are the advantages?
I feel like the biggest thing that comes to mind is peace of mind. I think when you're using out-of-box software, and I think you have to go through these questions that may or may not make sense to you, you're not sure. I think you're not sure whether it's done correctly or not. And for some of the people, I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I do give them credit. Like some people are like, I'm sure this is, it's cool. Like I don't need to say like, oh, everyone should come to like have a personal accountant or anything like that. Some people it is like, they're like, oh, I double checked everything. It's correct on TurboTax. That's fine. But I think the biggest thing is you have peace of mind, and also you have someone live and consistent to go over to make sure things are right and to explain. Because when you do TurboTax, like, yes, they have these live, actually, they try to hire me. They try to hire me. And they're like, oh, you should be like one of the live CPAs that works from home. So when people have some issue, like they can reach out to call me.
Interesting.
But the issue with that is you get different people.
Right.
Like you only have certain times you could talk to them.
Right.
I think they give you kind of more structured answers because they can't go into a lot of, so.
Right.
I think it's more of a personal relationship, and then you have peace of mind knowing that, hey, things are done right.
Yeah.
Versus you're kind of guessing and hoping.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would add to that and say, I think, I would like second everything you said. And then also, I've never used the TurboTax, so I can't speak from personal experience. But I did try to do my taxes once, and I got a big fine, and the fine was more than I pay you to do my taxes. So, first of all, financial, whatever checks out, that works. But also, I think even like having the conversation with you about my taxes, you bring up things that I wouldn't even think to ask. And you know me year to year, so like you can see like, well, what are you doing with your career, and what's, I remember you mentioned you might do this thing last year, so like, did you do that thing? And I'm like, oh, I did do that thing. Can I expense that thing? And you're like, yeah, you can. And I'm like, great. And I think that's the kind of thing that like, it's like having, like, you want to go to the same doctor every year for your physical because they notice the differences with you. It's like the same. I'd say it's a very similar thing from the client. I was going to say from the patient, from the client's perspective. Yeah. And you have much easier taxes than I do. So what do you think?
Yeah, my taxes have typically been fairly easy, but it is nice and useful for me insofar as it puts me in the headspace of how am I using my money? How can I project I'll be using my money in a few years? And what is the best way to position myself? And that's worth, paying, especially even like my taxes aren't complicated, so the amount I pay you is not that much, but it's still worth being able to have that conversation. And it feels nice to say, well, my accountant says this.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think for anyone listening or watching that hasn't done the getting a personal accountant thing, I think it sounds like more of like a highfalutin like luxury.
It sounds bougie for
like
sure,
it sounds bougie,
but it's not.
But
it's
I think
not.
It's actually, we all have to do our taxes, right? Mm-hmm. And so let's make sure we're doing it right. Yeah. Is all. It's like, again, like the doctor thing. Like it doesn't sound bougie to say, oh, I go to a doctor at an office, but it's like that's basically
Depends
what we're
who
doing.
You are,
we're
I
just
guess.
not going. Yeah, I mean,
I'm joking. Like, I agree.
Having a doctor that I go to every time versus like going to the ER for my checkup or something.
Well, I mean, and it's, I mean, it is, I do think it is a thing that we should address insofar as there is a kind of a maybe class barrier. I don't know. And I think there's two schools of thought, right? It's like, on the one hand, taxes should be easy enough in theory that anybody can just do them, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if the government already knows how much you owe. Like, why is it so opaque?
Yeah.
And on the other hand is kind of like what my philosophy is, what I said just a second ago, which is that, I like the idea of having a conversation about these sorts of things. Like, I believe in the idea of paying taxes because I do think that it's good that we all contribute money to a common thing, and then there's all these services that get, fueled as a consequence.
Yeah, we can have all these social programs that we're interested in,
roads
supporting each other.
Libraries, parks,
schools. Yeah. And like, granted, like, none of those systems are going to be perfect. Like, all of those things are going to be run in ways that like would be better run if it was smaller or something, but that's just the nature of it. There's going to be inefficiencies, right? And so I do think ultimately it's nice that there is a class of people, accountants, that are, invested in that sort of thing, and then we can go to them and have these sorts of discussions,
Yeah. And at the same time, I do recognize, like you're saying, I think that it's not accessible for everyone. Like we're saying it's affordable if you're making like minimum wage and you're a single parent or something, and like maybe it's not affordable, maybe you like just have to do it yourself.
But there are government, there's free taxes in the city, right? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes. I didn't know that. That's a good thing to share.
I mean, it's probably not, I don't know if you'd be able to get the same person every year. Maybe you could. I've never done that.
Yeah.
But, there are those opportunities to, it's just that I think, there's kind of just like there's a fear of doctors, there's a fear of paying your taxes, which is just kind of the fear of unfamiliarity. The idea of like, I don't know how to navigate the system. Even so far as I don't know, like, I feel anxious about going to the person that can help me navigate the system, And I don't know. I think ultimately on the balance, it's cool that there is this class of people that exist to help figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's also like the very people that are very affluent that find a way to take advantage of every possible loophole, which is the flip side. It's like kind of like lawyers. You know, lawyers defend you, and they can also, you know, defend people that are indefensible.
Right,
you know,
right, and and the people that are super affluent are the ones that can like really benefit the social programs that help the people that aren't, and so yeah. But yeah, I know in other countries, like I think in places in Europe, the government just sends you a bill.
Yep.
Have you heard of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I was studying abroad in France, I was speaking to some of the students and whatnot there, and they were saying like there's no individual tax returns at all.
Wow.
Like once you get your paycheck, they did all the work for you, and then you just get to keep what's left over, and that's it. Like at the end of the year, there's no tax return, there's no reconciliation, nothing.
What about for someone like me? Like, would I even be able to exist in Europe? Like
yes.
the way that my
yes, but I think and just specific again, this is not, don't quote me on any of this information. It's been a little outdated, but like I actually have clients that were in France that started a business and they had to come here because the taxes were so high. Like it was like something like 50 to 60%. So yeah, like you make $100, you're only keeping like 40.
Right.
So it's a harder, right? It's harder, but the flip side is like, I mean, the benefits there are amazing. Like you know, you get unemployment for actors, you get like stimuluses all the time.
Right.
It's just that right, but it's just that when it comes tax time, it's a lot harder because even though they do the work for you, that they take out a huge chunk.
Right.
So.
They probably don't also list every single expense that like when I go through and do it, they might not have access to like every single thing I've been able to expense Yeah.
But yes, I would say that the U.S. the tax system is much more complicated than a lot of the places that I visited. Like, you know, ones I'm coming off the top of my head are like Taiwan and like Europe and things like that. And I was like, yeah, it's much more simple there. It's not overly opaque and complicated as it is here.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And that's, I mean, for as long as it's like that, having an accountant that can help you navigate that really, really complicated system is really awesome.
Yeah.
What was it like do you remember any of the specifics about the Taiwanese system? Like, is there...
Oh, the best thing about them, because my brother-in-law, I was actually, funny enough, I think their taxes are due in May. Like I think end of May, June. So that's my most down season. So I visit Taiwan like usually in May, June.
Yeah.
So I was actually kind of looking at a tax return with my brother-in-law one because he was like, I got to get my tax return in. And I was like, this is so strange because this is like after tax season for me. But like he was like all like freaking out about his tax return and he was like, I got to get all my information together. But the nice thing about that is like throughout Taiwan, I believe they have a similar tax rate. So like not like us where it's like, oh, New Jersey is like 6% and then New York is not. So for them it's kind of like a flat tax rate for like where they are.
Okay.
So that's why it's easier for them to be like, okay, I live here and here, like I worked in 2 different places in Taiwan, but you're still getting kind of taxes. It's not like, oh, I have to file a separate state return with a credit transfer and additional. It's like it's
Right.
Interesting. I wonder that I can't imagine that everywhere in Taiwan is the same level of economically, like, you know, they're not economically equal, right? There have to be areas that are not as affluent as others. Is that correct? So like, would that negatively impact areas where it, you know?
Although I would say that income taxes, and this is something I say generally, like income taxes is one aspect of how government raises money. So like in the other areas, they may have other ways to raise income outside of income taxes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think a reason for them to do that is it's more consistency on a tax return. So it's not so much confusion as it is like, oh, if I worked in 3 states and I live in this state, like, what is that?
Right.
So for them, it's like, I worked in 3 places, but it's like, okay, I'm still going to get like one W-2 or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's actually, speaking of that, that's one question that I wanted to ask. I've been hearing that people, because everyone's working from home now, is that a weird thing that's happening for people in especially New York City, because we have like so many different tax brackets, and then like people live in Long Island and commute in, and people live in Westchester and New Jersey. Is that a weird thing that you're helping people navigate?
Yes, that is one of the biggest things that are, and actually that's part of the questionnaire that I think you had. Yeah, so you should have seen that. Yeah, so that is one of the that is one of the biggest questions during 2020 because of people working remotely and how that factors into their taxes. And usually for the ones in New York City, it benefits them because wherever they're going, it's got to be a lower, like usually it's a lower tax rate than New York City. So yes, like if you live somewhere over 6 months, then yeah, you can consider that your primary residence. And then that way you can kind of maybe save taxes if you ended up working remotely in a lower tax state.
Oh, interesting.
So interesting. So is New York City itself going to potentially be bringing in less income this tax season than normal because a lot of people are like paying only in Pennsylvania or whatever instead of New York City?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
I think, the thing to keep in mind is I'm just specifically talking about individual income taxes.
Gotcha.
I think there's like corporation, there's sales tax, there's a lot of other things that they come, But specifically just for individual income taxes that they bring, yes, I believe that will be lower this year because a lot of people have moved out during the pandemic and then they're working remotely. So they're like, hey, I'm not going to pay New York City taxes if I was like in Tennessee for the whole year. Yep.
Right.
Cool.
Interesting.
Well,
we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. That's I think that's a hot tip that maybe we should end on.
Yeah.
Because, just a little taste. If you like more, Jet Tax Service in Flushing, Queens is the tax service for you.
Oh, yeah.
But, thanks so much, Frank, for talking with us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is really great.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for watching. Hope you liked what we had to talk about with Frank. Hope you learned something about accounting, and I hope you learned something about the movie locations or just, had some extra thoughts. If you had extra thoughts and you want to share them with us in the comments, you can say what you're thinking.
Yeah. Do the liking and the subscribing, please. It lets us know that we're doing a good job and lets us further spread this project that we're doing. 5 marathon walks a week for a year. That's a lot of energy we're consuming, and your contributions to that is by giving us all this great feedback that you've been given. So
yeah. Anytime that somebody clicks the buttons and says nice things, or even when they're not nice things, it gives us energy and helps us to keep moving forward. And we are, this was our 34th week, so we have 18 more weeks to go.
Yeah.
Damn, that's like not that many.
I know.
So yeah, we're like, it's not that many, but I also feel like my fuel tank I refer to my fuel tank a lot. Let's say that. I like way more than at the beginning of the project. I've started referring to my fuel tank, and I've had to eat a lot more snacks to keep it full. So anytime that you interact with us, it helps to fill the fuel tank.
Yep. So thanks so much for your support and for watching. We hope you join us next week. Until then, take care.
Bye.
Bye.